What if the story you thought you knew had a deeper meaning all along? Welcome to What They Don't Tell You, stories of faith, courage, and truth they forgot to mention. They don't tell you that Esther wasn't a warrior. She had no army, no sword, and certainly no grand plan. What she had was fear, a heart full of uncertainty, and a heavy crown she never asked to wear. But what she did with that fear, with that crown, would change the destiny of an entire nation. This is what they don't tell you about Esther. Her story doesn't begin in a battlefield or a throne room, but in the quiet streets of Persia, where her people, the Jews, lived as exiles under a powerful king. She was an ordinary girl, an orphan raised by her loving cousin, Mordecai. Her life was simple, predictable, until suddenly it wasn't. One day, the king's officials came searching for a new queen, a replacement for the one who had defied him, and Esther, with her quiet grace and beauty, was taken from her home, from everything she knew, and brought into the dazzling, dangerous world of the royal palace. Imagine the confusion, the sheer terror of that moment. A young girl thrust into a world of politics and power she didn't understand. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't sought the spotlight. In fact, she was so afraid that she concealed her Jewish identity, just as Mordecai had advised. She was a hidden queen, living a life that wasn't truly her own. All she could do was follow the rules, try to survive, and trust that there was a reason for it all. And through it all, a quiet hand was guiding her, positioning her exactly where she needed to be for a moment that would test the very limits of her faith. For a time, there was peace. Esther won the king's favor and settled into her new, surreal life. But a storm was gathering on the horizon. A man named Haman, a high-ranking official filled with pride and venomous hatred, rose to power. He despised the Jews, and especially Mordecai, who refused to bow to him. Consumed by his rage, Haman devised a monstrous plan. He manipulated the king, convincing him to issue a decree to annihilate every Jewish man, woman, and child in the entire kingdom on a single appointed day. A death sentence had been signed, sealed, and sent out across the land. When Mordecai heard the news, he tore his clothes and mourned, sending a desperate message to Esther. He begged her to go before the king, to plead for the lives of their people. But for Esther, this was an impossible request. The law was absolute. Anyone who approached the king uninvited would be put to death unless he extended his golden scepter. For 30 days, the king hadn't called for her. To go now was to walk willingly into her own execution. She hesitated. The fear was paralyzing. She could stay silent, protect herself, and perhaps survive the coming massacre. Or she could speak up and risk everything: her life, her position, her future. It was in this moment of agonizing indecision that Mordecai sent his final, world-changing message. Do not think that you, because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Those words struck her heart. For such a time as this. Something shifted inside her. The fear was still there, but now it was joined by a flicker of purpose, a spark of divine courage. Her personal safety no longer mattered as much as the fate of her people. She made her choice. She sent a message back to Mordecai, asking him to gather all the Jews in the city to fast and pray for her for 3 days and 3 nights. She and her attendants would do the same, and then she would go to the king against the law. "If I perish," she declared, "I perish." After 3 days of prayer, the moment came. She put on her royal robes, took a deep breath, and walked toward the inner court of the king's palace. Each step was an act of faith. Each heartbeat echoed in the silent hall. She had no army, no weapon, only a prayer on her lips and a resolution in her soul. She stood in the throne room, visible to the king. He saw her. The court held its breath, a long, terrifying pause. And then he smiled. He extended the golden scepter. She lived. She had been given a voice. In that moment, she didn't just save herself. She opened the door to save her entire nation. Through a series of divinely orchestrated events, her bravery exposed Haman's wicked plot, and the day meant for destruction was transformed into a day of deliverance. But here's the real truth they don't tell you about Esther. Her extraordinary bravery wasn't born from a lack of fear. It was forged in the heart of it. She didn't start as a hero. She started scared, hidden, and unsure. She was an ordinary person placed in an impossible situation. Her strength wasn't in a loud roar, but in a quiet decision to move forward despite her trembling. God didn't need a perfect warrior. He needed a willing heart. He used her quiet courage to rewrite history. And perhaps that's the lesson we so often forget. True faith isn't always a grand, fearless charge. Sometimes it's the silent, trembling step of a person who simply decides to trust, who whispers to themselves, "If I perish, I perish," and walks forward anyway. So the next time life feels too big, the challenges too daunting, and your own voice feels too small, remember Esther. Remember the orphan girl who became a hidden queen. Because maybe, just maybe, you too were born for such a time as this. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that explores the deeper side of faith. We'll see you in the next one.